Hello and welcome to This Machine Kills Fascists Netrunner. Slightly different video today. Just come back from EMEA Continentals where me and some other players from EA Sports played this Azmari deck, Dial EA for Murder. And the response to the deck has been interesting and mixed, and I think it has a lot of an interesting history to how it came about and people's responses to it. In some ways, it's interesting for me personally as a deck builder. It's one of the first decks that I've built that I feel really very proud of and actually achieved what I want to do. And also, it's got some fun tricks and doesn't necessarily make sense on the surface. So the purpose of this video is basically to go through what it is the deck's trying to do, how it is that it came about, uh, all of the iterations that we went over, why we made certain decisions, and then how it formed in the day and how people have responded to it. So yeah, let's dive into it. So the very first version of the deck that I posted on the 23rd of June in the EA Sports Discord. And for each deck we build, we create a new Discord thread, post the link, and discussion goes in there. So generally, the way that happens is that if you're posting something brand new, unless something weird's happened, it's not like the busiest place in the Discord, right? So I posted this and immediately got one message from Cobra Bubbles, but at this point, he's kind of the only other person following the list, and I'm basically working on it in isolation up to this point. So the initial thought for the deck, I played a game of JNet, just random, and I was testing my Hashiko deck, which I've talked about in previous videos, and I'll talk about that in the full EMEA video that I do. But I played against somebody playing Asmari, and I was anticipating that they were on the re-education into Neurospike or Dupestad kill line. So I have played against this deck before. Local player, Click One Run, Sam Scott, played a similar list at a Norwich CO, which had like 16 people at it. But he'd done really well, and he'd come second, I think, in that CO, playing just the plain Neurospike Asmari. And I remember thinking at the time, oh, this, like, I'd written it off as a bit of a gimmick deck, and I remember seeing him play it and thinking, oh, this might be more of a deck than I realised because I watched him score out against some very good opponents. So when I'd played the deck previously, what I found was that if you push the early re-education score and your opponent is able to contest the remote and get in and steal that first re-education and potentially trash some of the stuff in that server, the chances of you being able to get the second threat online before they come and get you was very slim. Watching him play it, I thought actually, I think I was making some parity problems. There's probably more to this deck than I thought, but I didn't do much with that thought. So then I played this JNet game against a deck that I thought was the same as the one he was playing. I ran the remote early, like I got Banhard down, and I like jammed probably a cleaver or a buzzsaw onto the table so that I could get through whatever ice was there. And then I ran the remote. It's like turn 4 or something. I go down pretty low on credits, and I steal an agenda. Can't remember what the agenda is. Now I can't actually remember if they were on the combo kill package or if I just thought they were on the combo kill package. But I accessed the agenda and then I died to double punitive. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect them to be on punitive, my bad. But then I thought, punitive is actually a really good follow up to the threat that's being set up. The turn 4 or 5, I know from my Hashiko deck that I have to, in order to contest that early combo score, I have to put everything into that steal, right? And I'm not going to have money left at the end of it, and I'm not going to have necessarily cards in hand. So I took a look at the influence. Um, I've been playing versions of it. Nyulm was one, NY Menio's M, that had done quite well, and there were other versions of it that were playing 3 dupe stat. And I think Nyulm was playing like Rotor Turret or something to have an end the run sentry. Um, and I thought, oh, it's actually not that bad. It requires us to cut a dupe stat, which for turns it's trying to do its combo on like turn 4 or 5, cutting one of the combo pieces. Does feel a little bad. But beyond the third dupe stat, we're not really missing anything. Um, so the other big change at this point is that we'd just lost Bologna to the ban list. Previous versions of it that I'd played all had Bologna. Bologna was quite nice in the Neurospike version of the list. You could score a Bologna, gain 5 credits, and then do double Neurospike. And so that felt quite good. Um, so basically, the philosophy at the time was anywhere that you're cutting Bologna, just try slotting into Grima. So I put it into Grima. And this is kind of like where the uh, first version of the list went. 44 cards, and it has uh, Data Loop, Hedge Fund, but 2 dupes to add 3 punitive. Degrima. Um, I think Code Bubbles and I then play a couple of games of this. Um, so yeah, basically we felt that the ice suite was too expensive, and we had uh, serious doubts about Degree because uh, in one of the early games I played, I think me or Code Bubbles accessed a Degree Mill on R&D and chose not to steal. We realized that if that had been a send the message or just any 5-3 that they couldn't choose not to steal, then it would have been like an early kill off of a central. So yeah, we decide that we're going to move over to send a message, and that this is also the point where we make the decision to not play this deck on JNet Casual. So as EA Sports, as a testing team, we do a majority of our testing in paper, I would say. And we're probably one of the only testing teams that does that. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'd be super interested to know if there are other testing teams that do a lot of paper practice. But for us, yeah, we play Pub Runner every Thursday, and we actually use that as an opportunity to do some serious testing. Um, so a lot of the progress that happens on the deck doesn't happen online. A lot of this is happening through verbal conversations, so I don't actually have a great record of it. Um, but we made the decision that we're not going to play this deck on JNet Casual. And at this point, I'm pretty confident that this is me. This is the first time that I think that I'm thinking about taking this deck to EMEA, which is just a couple of days after I initially posted it um, on the 25th of June, about a month before EMEA. Um, but I don't think that anybody else is going to have an interest in this. Um, so we, yeah, we carry on. We carry on making tweaks. So first off, we change out the send message. Uh, that's our first kind of version of it. Uh, and I think that's about it that changes in this early stage. We're still on 44 cards with Hedge Fund and Data Loop. And we start to pick up some interest. I played a few games against Ash Nico and won. At this point, we had like a very good record against Anarch, even with them holding Steelskin. Um, and there's like a little bit of interest starts to creep up in the team. Ashbo asks how on earth this pile of cards is winning games. And I tested against Dabs, who was playing Arasana. In our first game against that we played, he got down 2 environmental testings really early, and pinhole, SMC, sorry, not pinhole, trickshot SMC, stole the stuff at the remote, never cared about it, didn't set up a threat. I was still learning the lines, and we were starting to identify what was good against us, and it's a lot of money and access to the remote. Um, so yeah, we continue making changes. We cut down to 40 cards. So the things that leave the deck are the data loops, which are too expensive to res. They provide like the right kind of tax, but not data loops a bad card. You shouldn't play it. And yeah, at this point it's Cobra Bubbles and I working in person on Thursday night. Basically, we get to this list, and we start to receive like a little bit of attention from the rest of the team. So Kikai starts observing the list, like watching the thread. Although at this point he's not played any games of it, he's not contributing. Kami also is being forced to play against it a lot because Kami is a very good Arasana player, and I don't have a lot of practice into, and I want to get a lot of practice into Shaper. Um, we don't have a lot of Shaper on the team at the moment, and so I force him to run into this deck a bunch of times. Um, people This is the way that conversations in the thread like tend to go. People ask questions about considering changes of cards. So you see here Kikai suggesting ping over wraparound. Ping does a couple of things for us. It's good on planogram, and it can give you a 3 piranhas res, but primarily it's there to target resources and provide an economic slowdown. Um, but yeah, people are kind of intrigued by the deck. It's quite funny to play a 40 card deck with the Jupiter combo and Punitive. I think it's like gets people's curiosity piqued. And then the other thing that's getting people's curiosity piqued is its win rate, which you can see down here. We have in a spreadsheet internally, we record basically all of our testing games. And you'll see here that we have a 67% win rate against Hashiko, a 75% win rate against Reg Arasana, and a 100% win rate against World Tree Arasana at this early stage. So we're feeling good. Early testing is showing progress, and I think by this point, it didn't take us very long to get to what is essentially the final version of the list. If we look at the original deck list I posted, which was on the 23rd of June, this version that we posted on the 28th of June, 5 days later, is one card different from the list that I would take to EMEA Continentals. So this deck was kind of birthed like close to fully formed. We had a couple of points over the course of like the month where we would try out 1 or 2 cards. I know at certain points we were on 3 Serevna and 2 Ping. At certain points we were up on 3 Attitude Adjustment and 41 cards. But we were pretty much there at this stage. So I think it's because the deck list is so simple. One of the things that I talk about with the team quite a lot is for my style of deck building, and I think you can see this in the Hashiko deck that I played, as well as this Azmari deck. Is that I want a deck that looks like somebody better at Netrun than me built it. I would like the list to look clean and tidy and not have a lot of one-offs. I want the deck to have every card feel like it justifies, and I want to be at minimum deck size. When I build decks, those are things that I prioritize above anything else, and I bounce off the rest of the team who will suggest like alterations and try and justify less cards that see less play. But yeah, my job is to be kind of quite dismissive of ideas and to just like to vouch for the boring cards that I've seen played before. I'm sure that like this is a skill. I'm not always the best at arguing for my ideas, and I'm sure sometimes I'm annoying to test with for these reasons. But I do think it's helpful to have someone on the team who is trying to argue from a place of like the canon, like the vanilla version of the list. I think an interesting like way in which we formed that is the way in which we worked on Kami's Lu deck from the previous meta. He'd taken like a 50 something card Lou to UK Nationals last year, which was like the first tournament we went to as a team. Um, and I'd like written that deck off for a long time before the tournament started. So I hadn't really looked at the list or played much with him on it. But after the tournament, it turned out that that Kami Kami had won all of his games against R Plus over the course of the weekend, something that nobody else had done. So we used that data point to realize that there was actually something really, really worth exploring in that Lou deck. And we spent quite a long process, which was a little painful for us, to get there, to get down to a 40 card list, which in the end, Tom really preferred playing, other people in the team were interested in, and took the tournaments, and generally worked together to improve it. But my job in that process was to poo-poo ideas, to advocate for commonly played cards, and I think in the end we made a pretty good deck. So yeah, here I was the instigator of this deck as well as the person advocating for it looking normal, and that was nice because it meant that other people could come in with bits of spice and suggest them. Cobra will suggested the 40 card deck. We'll get onto it, but Kikai or Cobra slash Kikai both suggested Klevetnik in time. And we talked through a bunch of other stuff that we don't see in the list. We talked about subliminal messaging. We talked about Dewars and other F2Ps, other stuff that we might want to play. Cool. So, what's the best thing you can do with this deck? The best thing that you can do with this deck is probably to jam a Rashida behind a ping turn 1 and fire that Rashida, play Sun Commandment into Predictive Planogram, into YDL, gaining 10 credits and ending turn 2 on 15 credits with an Ice on Centrals and Ice on the remote. Turn 3, put all of your combo pieces in the remote. Turn 4, win the game. Finish the combo costs 12 credits to fire. Dupe Stand costs 4 to res, Hollow Man's 2 to res and 4 to use, double advance gets you to 12. And it takes up your entire turn. But if you can do it on turn 4, then you're fine. And so you might look at the Punitive Counter-Strike, see that as a win condition, and think that's how you're supposed to win the game. If you think about decks like Restoring Humanity, you'll be familiar with the idea of poisoning archives, of putting 6 points in archives, or a bacterial that you can turn into 6 points, and then turning that into a punitive win whilst you're doing your other stuff. That's much less our plan. We don't want. You can poison archives, but I would suggest that Plan A, as we call it, is to combo Dupestad kill in the remote. The thing that you want to do, the ideal situation for you, is to set up the combo in the remote in such a board state that you don't think that the runner is going to be able to get in, and if they do get in, then you punitive them. Because getting into the remote server is expensive on cards, credits, or both. Realistically, you can poison archives and such, but the way that this deck is trying to win the game is by pushing Plan A, and then if they steal, go for Plan B. You much prefer to be in the situation where the agenda is stolen out of the remote to prevent you from winning the game than the agenda is picked up in archives or off centrals. Obviously, Punitive gives us lines to win the games where agendas are picked up out of centrals, but the primary aim for us is to score out of the remote. We're going to draw as many cards as possible in the early turns of the game so that we have access to 20 cards by turn 4, and we have access to our combo, or both combos, as well as a bunch of money. And then we're going to push the issue, and if they try and challenge it, we're going to kill them. this fork, the cool, if you don't get in here, I will dupe stat kill you, and if you do get in here, I'm going to punitive kill you, is really what makes this deck very good. Better than the previous versions, I think, is that you have a response to what happens if they get in and steal the agenda, and that is, I'm going to win the game. Um, so yeah, that's the core strategy that we're trying to play out. And at this point, you see that basically in full display. Um, there aren't any cards here that don't service that goal. So continuing on, we basically start practicing. So the thing that is important to realize is that we came up with the deck or pretty much a month beforehand. Um, but really, up until the last minute, we were practicing and getting better at it. Um, One of the things we identified early was that Essa would be a really difficult matchup for us. Essa is trying to tax your cards from hand and from R&D, and has the potential to mill you out. So if on my turn 2 I've drawn 20 cards, and Essa has done 10 sabotage, it's not looking good for us. Or like the game isn't going to go very long. And also, often we don't have a choice to discard cards from HQ. We'll be holding 2 punitive, some combo pieces, and maybe an agenda or 2, which means that we're going to be discarding from the top of the deck. Discarding from the top of the deck means that we are going to more likely hit agendas, more likely hit useful combo pieces. So it's tough. And we test that early. And one of the things that Davs 131 highlights is that this is going to be a losing matchup for us. And it's important to like still test your losing matchups, practice them as much as possible. It can be kind of easy to be like to just like mentally write off a certain matchup. That's the one you got to practice the most. So we did that with Essa. We start practicing different stuff. Practicing into Criminal is interesting. Criminal does 2 things. One, it can apply economic pressure to the deck. Obviously, it costs 12 credits for us to do the combo, and we're going to be resing things like ice. So diversion of funds is interesting. The Azmari money turns the economic pressure down in Criminal quite significantly. But the class act is a really good way to get around punitive. We have I have killed many criminals through a class act if they're not on 9 cards in hand, or if they steal 2 agendas in one turn by accident. It's something that's difficult to do, and if you're going, I've also done the Reeducation kill through multiple for a class act. One of the things that's important to note, right, is that Reeducation requires you to shuffle away as many cards from your hand, also to put them on the bottom of your deck, as many cards from your hand as there are in the runner's hand. And that means that if they end their turn with 9 cards in hand, in order to do the dupe stat kill, you have to shuffle away 9 cards in hand. That leads us on to the second biggest kind of tip for playing the deck, which is pre-advancing the agenda. It's something that you can do and gives you clicks on your kill turn to draw cards. So what I might do in a game where I'm playing at somebody who's installed Stone Chip to try and gain an extra turn, play around the dupe stat kill in the remote, is that I might play Sudden Commandment into Predictive Planogram, which is net 4 cards, plus my magic draw. I'm on 10 cards, I can shuffle them all away. If the agenda is pre-advanced and I have a Hollow Man, it's like 1-click Hollow Man, win the game. Sometimes it's double Hollow Man, sometimes it's buy the click back off of the Sudden Commandment. There's lots of different ways to get around Stoneship and Class Act, and that's all the lines that we're discovering during this period of practice. The first time that my opponent installed Stoneship, I didn't really have like the best plan for getting around it. Nowadays, when I play this deck, when I'm setting up my combo turn, I'm assuming that they're going to produce an answer, and I'm already playing, like, figuring out what will I do if they install the Stoneship and pop it? What will I do if they get their lap trigger? What will I do if, etc. So it's just worth realizing that testing is really important. On the last day of the tournament during the cup, Pacomis, I think, came up to me and asked, like, how do you play around Stoneship? Because reading the list, you might assume it dies to Stoneship. Uh, and I had like 4 good answers to that question. Um, so, um, yeah, basically, people start to take interest. And people start to take interest because you say, hey, can I play that Azmari deck into you? Do you mind? I'm just trying to. Do you mind playing one game? And they'll go. They might roll their eyes a little bit, be like, I don't really think that this is valuable practice for me to play into this terrible Asmari deck you've built, Ewan, but go on, we'll give it a try. And then you kill them, and then you kill them again, and then you kill them again, and you do it again and again and again. And then eventually they want to play the deck. um, so, yeah, the first message you see here from Kami and Frieden, that was after a night of a Thursday evening pub runner, uh, where they've come back. They both died to it like 10 times, and they're ready to play some more. Um, and we're getting more and more people trying out um, on closed JDEC games, but also on also on pub runners in Cambridge and Norwich. Davs played it at a small CO in France a couple of weeks back, which was a calculated risk that we took. We wanted to see how it worked out in like closed deck lists and whether or not there was something that we were just missing that people were going to figure out how to beat us. And it wasn't the case. He did really well. I won CO. And the deck didn't leak, which was also good. So, yeah, people started to take interest. And the last change that gets made to the deck happens literally in the week that we are in Italy for EMEA. So, Klevetnik was prominent in APAC Continentals. Like, it did well-ish and made a funny write-up about Klevetnik. And yeah, so we saw that. And Code Bubbles said, seems good. I said it seemed awful and terrible and bad, and we shouldn't play it, which, as we've established, is my role in the group. And then Kikai actually was the person who sleeved it up, put it in the deck, and tried to play with it, and found that it actually does work. So Klevetnik, when you res it, you may pay 2 credits to blank an opponent's resource until the end of your next turn. And so he was really worried about the lap matchup. We've been testing the lap matchup, and Kikai was worried that a lap opponent who knows what they're doing is very hard to kill with the deck, which is still true. And yeah, he envisioned using Klevetnik as a tool for blanking a Stoneship. Person standing the remote because you're threatening the kill, they run through it, you turn off the Stoneship, they still have to access, and they're not going to be able to end with more than 6 cards in hand. That's the idea. It also turns off Banha, which means that an Anarch who thinks that they're getting into a server will suddenly not be able to get into a server. They've wasted a click and are suddenly in a whole heap of trouble. And there are other ones that we could blank in more niche lines, a Dr. Nuka, a environmental testing, a class act, but primarily it's for those 2 cards. And it was eventually Ben's testing into LAT that made us change our minds. Yep, we'll do it. And that was the in-person testing that we did in Italy primarily, which convinced me that we were going to be playing Klevetnik. Also, the card is very funny, and I think that won some people over. So, how well did the deck do? The deck did really well. We had something like a 76% win rate in Swiss. Three of us made Swiss made the cut with the deck. Myself, Kikai, and Cobra Bubbles, as you can see here. We then did really well with the deck in the cut. The deck went 5-1 in the cut. It won three of its games. It took a game off of me, it took a game off of Cobra Bubbles, and it took a game off of Kikai. The way that the pairings worked in the cut was very unfortunate for our team. But you take the hand you dealt, not going to complain. Uh, and yeah, the deck ended up going 5-1 in the cut. It did incredibly well. Um, we were super happy. Cobra Bubbles has done a fantastic write up that I will link to in the description. But I wanted to highlight some like additional thoughts about how this went down. So I looked back on it, and if just looking down this list, uh, in across the whole tournament, the deck took two games off of Yantuno, took one game off Ryan Band Twins. Augusta Caesar beat this deck in the cut. Kikai lost a game to this deck. Cobra Bubbles lost a game to this deck. Bridgman lost a game to this deck. Test Running lost a game to this deck. I think Gia beat the deck. Rahi lost a game to this deck. I lost a game to this deck. And more people in the cut after this lost to this deck. So broadly, we played into an incredibly strong field that played a lot of our worst matchups, which were Lat and Essa. Over the course of the weekend, we beat I think almost a dozen Lat and more than half a dozen Essa. We did incredibly well with it into our bad matchups and in open deck lists and against incredibly skilled opponents. So at the end of Saturday and throughout Sunday, we are feeling amazing. It's the best feeling in the world. Having like the new deck. Had a conversation with Tuno after I beat it. Punitive kill against its Esser, I think. And yeah, it kind of just said like, not gonna lie, I thought that this meta was solved. I thought we'd seen all of the decks, but this seems kind of cracked, which was like for me better than making the cut. And yeah, so just felt like we were doing amazingly, which is why it was then very funny for all of us when messages like these started appearing on Slack. Uh, I think quite understandably, anybody who takes a look at the deck should be a little bit suspicious of the fact that this is winning games. Often, punitive decks are winning off of like a surprise factor, or they just got a little bit lucky. But there were 8 of us playing it in the tournament, and we went 76% overall. I think most people who we played against, or who at least I played against, throughout the tournament knew exactly what I was doing after like round one of Swiss. Um, so it really wasn't the case that uh, we were benefiting from it being a secret deck. People didn't have the time to tech against it before the tournament began, and people didn't have time to practice games into it. So even if they theoretically understood what it was doing, they still had room to make mistakes. Um, so we, yeah, I think people underestimate how good this deck is, though. The deck is particularly good at punishing. Yeah, it's just really good at getting set up very quickly, going very fast, faster than PD, faster than any of the other like the Iswak deck that's trying to score 2 agendas. We're just trying to score 1 agenda. Um, and so yeah, I think this did fantastically well. I'm very happy with how it performed. Uh, on Tuesday after the tournament, Andre was on stream at the Metropole Grid and said, um, "Yeah, the deck did well, but it will lose games in open deck lists," which is very funny because that's not what happened. We'd already had the open deck list tournament with the deck where it won games, um, and finishing fourth overall at the largest tournament of the event so far. Very happy, very happy indeed. So yeah, I think that it's totally reasonable to underestimate this deck. Um, but just know that like it's incredibly consistent. It's able to do all of the things it wants to do very early, and the punitive kill is the punishment for stealing from the remote, not the punishment for stealing 6 points from archives, which a lot of other decks are like more tempted to do for the most part. Um, so yeah, all in all, the deck did incredibly well, and it's really worth watching on the NSG stream. There is Kikai played one game against Tesserating's Esser, um, which was just incredible to watch and showed off, I think, why the deck does so well. It's able to produce threats very quickly, and he makes some mistakes in that game. I think it could have been an even clearer victory, but it was an amazing game to watch, incredibly tense and super fun. Um, yeah, the commentators for that game were lovely, but they did say, "Why is this deck looks awful? Why is it doing so well?" And totally fair play. I get it. So yeah, if you're curious, please play some games of it. I think it's super fun, and yeah, I think there's anything else. If anyone's got any questions, I've got pages and pages of notes that I wrote for the team about how to best pilot it, some tips and tricks for playing around certain matchups, as well as various other thoughts. So feel free to leave a comment or send me a Discord message to talk it through. I think this deck will be kind of grim on JDeck Casual for a while until everyone learns to beat it. And yeah, I will be doing a second video talking about my trip to EMEA in general, and I'll do the debrief, go through game by game, everything that happened. But I just wanted to have one that really focused in on this deck because I think it deserved a bit of attention. I say I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud of EA Sports and how well we did. And yeah, super duper fun. Thank you very much for watching.